Good morning and welcome to News with a View. This is February 3rd, 2026. Excuse me, episode 23. And I'm your host, John A. Costa. Today, well, I don't see me going live here. Oh, now I do. Today, we're going to discuss Chuck Schumer. Made some statements, and you know how I feel about Chuck. I said he's a very competent politician, and I do have a certain amount of respect for Chuck Schumer in, or was his ability to bring people together. That's not so much the case now. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, of course, warned that if the House Republicans try to jam voter ID legislation into the Trump-backed funding deal, well, it's Republican-backed, and there's no deal. It is what it is. It would be dead on arrival in the Senate. House Republicans want to walk away from the current spending fight with a victory of sorts, despite President Donald Trump's taking the lead and negotiating a temporary funding truce with Schumer and the Senate Democrats that will last 2 weeks. Now, we're at a shutdown again, and I said this would happen, and the Democrats won't do a damn thing to help America. So, they're demanding, and this is Democrats demanding that the 5-bill funding package, which stripped out the controversial Department of Homeland Spending bill in favor of a 2-week funding extension, also includes the House Republican updated. I'm sorry when I said them, it's the Republicans who want this. Updated Safeguarding America Voter Eligibility Act, dubbed Save America. If none of you are aware of it, or you don't quite understand what it means, it's already law on you have to be a United States citizen to vote federally. But it's up to the states to enforce that. And you're having states saying, well, that only happened in a handful of cases. Georgia said only 20 people that they found had voted were not citizens. But none of the other states are giving data on that. It's an interesting dilemma for the Democrats. Safeguarding America Voter Act is a proposed United States law that would amend the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 to require documentary proof of a U.S. citizenship. Seems okay. You need a proof of citizenship to register to vote. Doesn't seem like that's an awful ask, right? Senator Schumer of New York, the minority Senate leader, says the SAVE Act is a Jim Crow era style proposal, and if part of the spending package, any deal will be dead on arrival on the Senate floor. So, the senator is saying that they won't vote for it if it has a voter ID, because that's really what this is about. This is about getting a voter ID. And, of course, the Democrats are totally against any of that. They're saying, well, we don't need one. It's already law. right? Don't need it. Not necessary, because we have a law. Yet, we have a law with the Second Amendment, too. And you keep heaping more and more regulations on that. But that's okay, right? So he speaks out of both sides of his mouth. They have no problem tying other regulations and steps when it comes to the Second Amendment. But to secure the voting on a federal level and have it filtered down to the states that they must comply. Oh, no, can't have that. That's too complicated. Schumer remarks means if voted for, or those who support this proposal, they must be white supremacists. Because the Democrats feel anyone in America should be allowed to vote if they say that they're a citizen. They don't have to prove it, though the law states they have to, but the states are the ones of the guardian of that. And who's to say they're doing that? Because they won't show proof of that. The idea that somehow women, blacks, and poor people who can't find their birth certificates will be disenfranchised is so not true. I would say that in the poor who are receiving some form of government assistance, they're already citizens, and let them prove it through that. There's ways for the government to cross-check, but states won't relinquish that information. You could say, we don't want that information out there because it could, it's a privacy issue, and, your right to vote is sacred, and who you vote for. Well, they're not asking on who you vote for. They're just saying, show me a list of your registered voters, and we'll compare their names to our list of citizens. So there's a lot of baloney going on with this. There's a whole lot of baloney. States mainly are going to complain because this bill will eventually pass. Are saying that they don't want to spend the money to fulfill a federal obligation. States, you can't accept federal money and not expect something's in it for the federal government. And I think that most Americans feel a voting ID won't hurt anything. And the left is screaming, no, we don't need it. It's too cumbersome. Yet when it comes to the Second Amendment, like I said, no. We could add everything to that and make it so difficult for you to fulfill the Second Amendment. We can burden everyone with that. Right? Bob in New York. But for voting, we can just let anyone walk in the booth, and we don't know who's checking it and who's doing it. So the big takeaway, the SAVE Act would require everyone registering to vote to provide a document verifying their citizenship. It would then require states to enhance voter list maintenance programs to identify non citizens who have inadvertently gotten on the roll if they don't have such practices in place already. So if the states are saying we have that already, we're already doing it, what's the big deal then? Why are they fighting it so hard? Why are the Democrats fighting this so hard? Asking for verification of citizenship might require a birth certificate. It might require, other forms of ID. If and they're saying the military people could be hurt by this. Military already knows if you're a citizen or not. You do not need to be a citizen to join this United States services. So right there, they could get they know from that list that this guy is not a United States citizen. The takeaway is the states must have some system that checks it. The federal law is clear that only U.S. citizens are permitted to vote in federal and state elections. Current states decide how to enforce this requirement. So, this is what to know about the bill. All states require new voters to attest to their U.S. citizenship when they register, and all states conduct voter list maintenance to identify potential ineligible voters on the rolls. How they can accomplish that varies. So, again, states kind of run the scene in state and in federal elections. The SAVE Act would require states to collect and document proof of citizenship from voters, which few states currently do, and establish an additional voter list maintenance process. In states that have strong links between voter registration and motor vehicle agency, the transfer of citizenship data can be quick. So when you go to the motor vehicle, you might have to show proof of citizenship. And if you don't, that gets listed as, didn't provide citizenship ID. And you might not be able to vote. And there's what the argument is if the person can't find their birth certificate or can't produce it or can't obtain it, they misplaced it. Well, you got to go get a new one. And if you were applying for a job, you have to bring your birth certificate as part of ID processes. So, and the company that you work for can always change their policies to say it must be produced every year, or with every change you make on a W-2 or W-4 or whatever form you're filling out that goes to the federal government, you must have your birth certificate with you. They make a copy of it and they say, we verified it. Or they just check a box that it's been verified. The idea that this would stop anyone from voting is ridiculous. And, people are saying, well, it's hard for people to get around. It's, motor vehicle might be 50 miles away. The voter registration center might be 25 miles away or 30 miles away. that's not the federal law's problem. That's a state issue. And the states will have to rectify that. The SAVE Act does not authorize federal funding for the new state's responsibilities it creates. Now, this is where the 10th Amendment could be applied. Because in the 10th Amendment it says we don't have to follow federal law. Now, that's a dicey little road to go down, and the states have the right to say, hey, if it's costing us money, let the feds pay for it. The converse side of that argument, if a state makes it, is do you have a state, let's say EPA? Yeah. Do you have a state election board that the state pays for? Yes. Why do you have a state EPA when there's a federal EPA? So your idea of funding, you might get caught in a little trap there. And they could turn around and say, well, our EPA is stronger in its enforcement than the federal government. And the argument then would be back. So wouldn't that say you would make this voting rights and voting act even stronger than the federal government? A question that could be asked. If enacted, some states would need to make significant changes to their voter registration process, and there is no phase-in period. With this. This is a light switch. Click. You got to start doing this now. All these things can be massaged a bit. And in the case of where people don't have an access to their birth certificate. I was born in New York. I live in South Carolina. For me to go online and do that is extremely cumbersome and expensive. And it might be a 3-month wait on that. So I think the idea of trying to implement it, because right now you can go to the Bureau of Statistics and for the state and request them, and you have to fill out a whole bunch of things on it because you just can't request someone's birth certificate. It's got to be you. So you're going to have to make a photocopy front and back of your driver's license. If you need to do that. Now, if you have real ID, that might help. But that was only to get on airplanes that you've been screened and stuff, and not so sure that would help in proving you're a citizen. Not sure how that works. States that can't comply might face running state and federal elections separately with separate procedures, or they might have to keep separate lists of voters who have not provided proof of citizenship and permit them to vote only in state and local elections, even though the federal law states they must be citizens. The states control how that works. It's why there was a 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment was the guardrail for the first 9 amendments. And those are forever amendments. Look it up, and you can find out for yourself. Arizona already has such a bifurcated process, which has seen a stream of litigations dating back to 2004. Because who checks the list, who verifies it, who does what. And it gets real technical because the state doesn't have to release this and you have to fight for it to get it. And it's not as clear cut as the Democrats are saying it is. Just ask Trump and even Hillary Clinton when she wanted recounts and look at stuff. And then the Democrats told her, you stop because you're going to open up a can of worms. You lost, that's it, move on. By requiring driver license applications to serve as a voter registration applications, the bill might force all states, including the 6 now exempt from the NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, to direct their DMVs to perform voter registration services in conjunction with a driver's license services. States will need time and money to create automated data transfer processes between DMV and voter registration records. The bill includes a private right of action. Now this is an interesting clause. The private right of action would allow individuals to sue a particular state if they feel the law is not properly being enforced. Now, that means that the Department of Justice does not have to step in and do that. They could have anyone sue. And this could also work to the Democrats, who, if everyone's Republican and they want to challenge, hey, I think that, only one Democrat voted out of 2 million. Yeah, I'm going to sue to see if this is being properly enforced because they won't give me the information. So I have to go through the courts to get it. But it's interesting because normally that would fall under federal, and state election boards do fall also under their own attorney general of that state and so forth. So I don't know if you need individuals to do it. The bill would establish criminal penalties for election officials who mistakenly register an applicant to vote who has not presented proof of citizenship. It's a key word there, mistakenly. So they're saying even if by mistake you made a mistake, you're going to be held responsible. So that if you say, oh, hey, 500, I made 500 mistakes. All right, you're going to fire me, but all right. But now you could be held with penalties. It doesn't say what those penalties are. The penalties can be anything from a $1 fine to, 1 day in jail for each offense, or 20 years in prison for election fraud. Kind of needs to be spelled out. Now, President Trump in March issued an executive order, and that was March 2025, requiring, among other things, citizens provide documentary proof of citizenship when they register to vote. The order is likely to face legal challenges, and it's unclear how it would interact with the SAVE Act should it pass. So you have a federal order on a law that already exists. Then he just cancels that executive order. So, when they go, it's unclear how it would interact. It wouldn't, because he would release it. So that's kind of a false narrative on the part of the Democrats. Senator Schumer beating the drum that you would have to be a racist to think that this is a good bill, because he tied it to Jim Crow. Jim Crow did not stop women from voting. Jim Crow did stop black people from voting. And do we have that now? Is that a problem? Because the last I looked, we have a lot of black elected officials that were voted in by black people. And we have a lot of minorities that you would call Latinos, just in Texas, turned a seat over. So no one would be affected. They just have to prove their citizenship. And that's not hard to do. Now, if your birth certificate says you were born in Guatemala, or you go to them and go, I can't provide one because I can't get one out of that state that I'm in, China won't send me one, or, whoever, Iran won't because I'm over here, and they said, tough luck, you can't get it. And you are not a citizen, shouldn't be voting anyway. Right? I'll tell you what the Democrats are afraid of with this bill. The Democrats know that people who don't do this, who don't register to vote, either one, don't want to vote, and that's up to them, and that's fine. But the rest of them are either here illegally or they're not citizens. It makes finding out who's who a lot easier. If I'm running a nice checkpoint and John Costa pulls up and they go, yeah, good to go. Because they're only stopping me as a driver. They could ask for citizenship ID or ID of everyone in that vehicle, every at least adult, not a minor, but at least the adults. And again, the Democrats don't want to give that. They don't want to give any ammunition or help to ICE. They never did. This whole idea of 30 million people across the border, undocumented, was all about voting. Why do you think they moved so many of them to like Ohio, a red state, so they could turn it blue? Allow these people to vote in state elections, and you now have a blue legislation. You know, the legislators would be dominated by Democrats. It is very telling of the Democrats, very telling of Schumer, who is so upset that he throws out Jim Crow. Let the Democrats shut the government down. Let them do it again. And this time, if I was Trump, I'd get up there and say, why? And Trump's going to have an out for saying, hey, was working with the Democrats. And I'd be willing to do this for 2 weeks, but, you know, you're going to be right back there again in 2 weeks. So, you know what? Screw Chuck Schumer, and let's get a voting ID law passed through the Senate. And then if these guys want to fall on the sword and go all out and say it's unconstitutional and stuff, let it go through the courts. But it's not unconstitutional. And they know it. They know it. There are certain things in this bill that I don't agree with that, you know, does make it kind of cumbersome for the states. But if you want federal money, dance. Dance for me. And honestly, that's what it needs to take. I don't think any intelligent Democrat, working class person, is going to have a problem with voter ID. The people on welfare and government assistance, not Social Security, because that's not assistance. We've paid into the system, and now it's paying us back dividends. So, not there with you on that. But if you're getting food stamps, if you're getting any of those benefits, then you should be able to say, I'm a citizen or I'm not a citizen. Not to make you eligible for those programs. Not to say that you're eligible for those programs. But you self-identify. And so you could then give that information to the state to say, hey, this person, this Social Security number, this street address, said they're not citizens. If they're on your list, take them off, and then, you know, send us a confirmation that it's been done. So that is what the Democrats are stopping. The ease at which data then can then be grabbed and looked at in today's world is accelerating 100% every year. And that is the true check. And the Democrats know who's ever in charge of that checking, who's ever in charge of inputting that data and doing it, they rule. They're all powerful. They're the wizards behind the curtain. And the Democrats don't want that. Democrats don't want people to be able to put their fingers on information immediately. And I'm sure this would have been the same if this was Democrats wanting it and the Republicans arguing. Because that's politics. But I think in this case, voter ID in the last 3 elections really does come into play. And people want to know, and people should know, that the people that are voting are allowed to vote. And it should only be citizens. It was set up that way. It wasn't set up to, let anyone walk in that booth. I think Schumer will find himself in a little bit of doo-doo here when that bill goes through and they turn it down and they go, well, we had it all worked out and it was the Republicans who messed it all up. No. It will be the Democrats' votes that shut it down. And if states are already doing what you're saying they're doing, this doesn't hurt anything, right, Chuck? It might be redundant, but it's not going to hurt anything. And like I said, you have no problem putting tags on the Second Amendment and in states and making states have the right to the point of almost denying the Second Amendment to you. That you're fine with. But a voting ID law that doesn't hurt anyone? That you think is unfair? And your idea will hurt black people? How? How will it hurt women? Women didn't have birth certificates? Black Americans don't have birth certificates? Are you saying that the Democrats or people are so stupid they don't know how to get their birth certificate? Or they're so poor they can't pay the $25 to get the birth certificate? And I think the idea of, showing some proof of being a citizen when you have so many people that are here illegally for the Democrats under the Democratic push for that, they find it repugnant that the question even be asked. Well, Democrats, you're in for a real showdown. And I'm hoping and urging everyone to tell President Trump, we want a voter ID. He promised a voter ID. He promised reforms in this. And if the Democrats shoot it down, then the federal government should be able to go into these states. If we feel that the states are not doing their job, we have a right as the federal government to go in there at the federal government's cost. And look at those records. If you're not going, if you're saying we're not going to comply or we're not going to help you with this because it costs us money, now it doesn't cost you any money. We're going to pay it, but we're going to put our people there. And, what can the state say? No, you can't. Sure they can. The Supremacy Clause, Article VI 6, Clause 2, says they can. So when you hear this nonsense that it can't be done, or how dare them, it's a lie. All right. 40 minutes of beating up Schumer, in a sense, beating up Schumer, who deservedly needs to be beaten up because he is so outraged that we want proof of citizenship to elect people that affect citizens. Do you see how silly that argument is on his part? That United States citizens want to make sure it's United States citizens voting because those politicians then affect American citizens. And the outrageousness of Schumer to even go there and say it's racist. It's not racist. It's freaking common sense. I have to show a driver's license when I check into a hotel. I have to show proof when I get on an airplane. I have to show proof at the bank on any transactions I do in a walk-in basis. So asking a person for their citizenship, for voting on matters that will affect me, citizen John, that's not asking too much. That's not asking too much. All right. Please give to a charity of your choosing. If you're not comfortable doing that, I certainly understand why you might not be comfortable doing it. Please look at a food bank. Go to a food bank. They always need some type of food. Garbage trucks, only 3 days late. Food banks always need money. So if you don't want to give food, please give money to a local food bank because that helps right in your locality. And then you could also ask them, do they need, clothing that I no longer use anymore? It's good. It's great. Do you need anything like that? And now you're really helping people. Say a prayer. Prayer does work. No matter what a Democrat might tell you. All right. And with that, I'm done. I did 43 minutes of this. Enough for today. And I'm just going to push this right out the door. Very little editing. It is now 9 a.m. By 11 a.m., this should be up as a podcast, as a playlist, as a video on my channel. Please subscribe to my channel. If you're not, and you watch it and you go, hey, all right, this jerk seems to be okay, please join. If you like the videos, like. Regardless, leave a comment. I do answer all my comments, and I don't erase them, as Bob in New York has accused me of doing, and then he had to sheepishly say he was wrong. All right. Everyone, be good. As I fade to